As a financial planner that helps people with their retirement tax planning, I often get asked in our planning process, how long until my Roth conversions actually pay off? And the good news is that there is a simple framework to find out, and in some cases, a Roth conversion can pay off sooner than you think. So stick around to learn how to avoid a retirement tax bomb and keep more of your hard-earned savings. But before we answer that question, it's important to understand why I assess every client situation for this type of strategy. Now, many of you are like my clients. You may have a joint bank account with your spouse, but the hard truth is that your tax deferred account is a joint account with the IRS, right? You might see $2 million on your balance sheet, but not all of that money is yours. Depending on your tax rate, some of it belongs to Uncle Sam at some point. So if you're someone that's looking at Roth conversions and asking yourself, when will this actually pay off? It really comes down to this. Pay taxes at what we believe to be the lowest rate based on what you'll owe in the future. I know that's a mouthful, but if you own one of those larger tax deferred accounts, taxes are just not optional. But what you can control is how, when, and at what rate you decide to pay them at. And we're gonna see how this all comes together as we go through this case study here. But let's start to understand the key reasons to even consider Roth conversions, because number one, of course, we know that the IRS is not so patiently waiting. For some of you, 30 to 50% of that tax deferred account will be paid to the IRS. Now, that is because of required minimum distributions. You make that deal with the IRS, you get a tax savings up front. But again, these RMDs, if you aren't careful, could potentially push you into a higher tax bracket than you may be right now or at the start of retirement. But if we don't proactively start to draw that balance down, there could be a scenario where your accounts grow so large that there's taxable income that's going to skyrocket, leaving you behind with a massive tax bill. And by decreasing your pre-tax amount with those Roth conversions, you'll also start to shrink your future RMD obligation, helping this pay off later in life. The second reason for Roth conversions is it can help keep your taxable income low enough to preserve some of those AGI-dependent tax benefits. For example, like avoiding Medicare IRMA surcharges, right? IRMA is one of those sneaky tax gotchas that you might have to pay higher Medicare premiums than your neighbor, even if you have the same coverage, simply because of those required minimum distributions or income that pushes your tax bracket too high. Now, controlling taxable income, you can help sidestep some of these penalties, which is another reason why Roth conversions are even thought of. And by putting these things all together, and we're going to see this later in the video, and doing a targeted Roth conversion strategy, this is really where the value comes in to potentially reduce that lifetime tax bill, right? By targeting Roth conversions strategically at a specific tax rate, and I call this the Roth conversion sweet spot for you, you could potentially save significant amount of taxes over your lifetime, and we're going to see how this plays out. But these are just a few of the top reasons to even consider Roth conversions over the long term. Of course, the question you're thinking is, okay, how long is this going to take, right? I'm going to pay some tax now, and in most cases, I'm not going to reap the benefits until maybe a little bit later in life, unless you know about these three other reasons that we're going to talk about at the end of this video, and I think the last one might surprise you. But there is a wrong way to view Roth conversions, and I just want to address it right up front, because understanding this will be kind of a big unlock in terms of understanding the power of Roth conversions. And to understand this, we need to understand what drives better or worse outcomes when doing Roth conversions. The most common answer and the wrong answer is time. Time doesn't matter if your tax rate is going to be the same when you do the conversion versus if you didn't do the conversion all the way through. When the tax rates remain the same, the time horizon or the growth rate does not matter or influence the decision to make a Roth conversion. The most significant changes happen when your tax rate changes. So let's take a quick look at this example. You can see with this scenario, if John takes $5,000 from his salary and saves via Roth after taking out taxes and contributes about $3,750 to a Roth, let's say at some point the market has grown his contribution by 100% over a certain time period, and one day it's at $7,500. Now, the reality is that's the same outcome as if John deferred that $5,000 into a tax deferred account, like we see above, had the same market growth, and had to pay the same tax rate later on when he wanted to receive the money. It's a complete wash. Both paths produce the same exact outcome, and this doesn't matter if it's 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years. If tax rates remain constant and an individual's taxable income stays the same, the investment growth rate is the same, right? Choosing between Roth and paying taxes now, or a traditional IRA and paying taxes later, would yield the same amount of after-tax wealth, of course, assuming all the other factors remain equal. This is where the art side comes into planning. And that's because the reality is that we typically move through different tax rates throughout our life. The tax rate that we sit at is not this fixed monolith that never changes. Sometimes we aren't sure where it will go, but in other situations, it's more obvious. Some years are great to do Roth conversions, and others may be a horrible year to do Roth conversion. The greatest thing we can do is monitor this on an ongoing basis, because at the end of the day, paying taxes whenever they will be the lowest, whenever you think they'll be the lowest, will maximize after-tax wealth. So let's bring it together and look at someone who has a large tax-deferred balance. Of course, Brian and Lisa here, not real names. They have about 51% of their money in tax-deferred, 43% in taxable, and some tax-free already. How do we determine when this will actually pay off, and what will the impact of doing target Roth conversions over the lifetime be? Now, ultimately, Brian and Lisa might end up in this tax valley scenario, right? If they don't do any Roth conversion. For their case, they retire early, they feel great about themselves, they don't pay a lot of taxes earlier on, they have the taxable account where it can create a lot of great income and just kick the can down the road with taxes with those tax-deferred accounts. But that's where they would eventually start to see this peak right here, right? When Uncle Sam comes into the picture because of required minimum distributions. And of course, they want their fair share after that money has been growing and compounding for the past several decades. This tax valley right here is usually a green flag for me as an advisor to look at Roth conversions. You know, there's a lot of spreadsheets, planning softwares that can help you run something similar to what you're looking at on my screen, where you can run a side-by-side scenario of, hey, what if I didn't do Roth conversions versus what if I did, and I model out my cash flows based off of my income. And for their situation, again, everyone has a unique one. This is why we do custom strategies for our clients. Doing a Roth conversions at the 24% tax bracket is seeming to be the sweet spot for them versus just waiting and going along with that taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free route, right? Kicking the can down the road. For them, we'll purposely pay a little bit of taxes up front because we know that that tax equilibrium rate for them is that 24%, and this will smoothen out their tax over their lifetimes and avoid getting killed in RMDs. And if we run the mathematical side just to see, hey, if we compare this, at least for a lot of people, some earlier, the math shows that the payoff is usually in the mid-80s. Now, this is a fun tool to help understand the potential impact from a technical standpoint, but there's a big if, right? We don't know the future. We don't know if tax rates will go up. In that case, maybe taking advantage of Roth conversions earlier would be a better benefit to you and pay off sooner. And if you have a crystal ball, please let me know in the comments below. I know some of you do. And another relevant factor, at least for the next 4 years, is the possibility that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will get extended and we remain in that lower tax rate environment. So again, all these tax law changes is why you have to be strategic and why you have to look at this on a year-to-year basis. But what not a lot of people talk about is the ways that Roth conversions can actually pay off sooner than your mid-80s, sooner than what running an analysis might look like. And number one is when the stock market is down. Now, you know there's a common myth that if you're in your highest tax bracket, you should never do a Roth conversion. That, my friends, is false. What we did for clients, even if they were in a high tax bracket, for example, in 2022 and 2020, is convert some of those high growth assets to Roth while the market is down. And then when the market rebounds, all that money is tax-free growth. They call this essentially stealing the Roth conversion, when Roth conversions are essentially on sale. And secondly, this is a big one and an unfortunate reality, is going to be the impact of the widow's penalty. Now, by doing that Roth conversion today, and potentially you're married filing jointly, you have a larger tax bracket, you're essentially paying taxes at a lower rate. When, God forbid, one day you or your spouse have to file single, if one of you predeceases each other, this helps decrease the impact of when you file single and your tax bracket shrinks. Thirdly is having a large unexpected medical expense. Now, having money in that tax-free bucket when there is an expense that goes outside of the plan, outside of things that you were expecting, you now have a pot of money that won't drive up your tax rate. Lastly, you can position taxes in a way to help that next generation. Many people will not want to leave a mess to the next generation. I've sat in on countless meetings where I've seen how a tax tax-deferred account is really a sort of a tax bomb for the one who inherits it, especially if they have a higher tax rate themselves. If you leave behind a $4 million tax-deferred account in the next generation, you've worked really hard, but some of you don't want your next generation to pay up to 50% tax, right? And by doing these conversions, this is essentially prepaying some of that inheritance tax for the next generation, and that's a factor that goes well beyond the break-even age. So overall, the Roth conversion should, in my opinion, be viewed as a tax insurance. If you have some favorable tax rates compared to where we estimate them in the future, it seems pretty appealing, and it's a nice opportunity to lock in this rate. Tax brackets are kind of like tax buckets, and it's either use it or lose it every year. If we don't fill up in those brackets during those lower years, we lose them. We want to help mitigate of what we can, at least in the future when you're 70, so you don't have to take those monstrous RMDs. And just like car insurance, again, we have coverage for future unexpected rises in taxes. But just like if you have a beat up Pinto, you may not want to insure it. If you don't expect your tax rate to increase and you don't have a significant amount in that tax deferred account bucket, that's where maybe less favorable, at least from a mathematical standpoint, if you want to apply Roth conversions to your own situation. But it's nice having that portion of income that we can pull from in the future that is completely tax free. But there's a lot more to the complexity of Roth conversions. So I made a video going into detail of how I look at Roth conversions for clients, all the pros and cons and things that you need to know and also avoid. And you can watch that video by clicking right here. Once again, this is Matt Calcagno, certified financial planner and advisor over here at One Degree Advisors. If you'd like to talk to me or someone on my team about your financial plan, click the link in the description and schedule a call. We'd love to talk with you.